floods, and extreme weather events. This extreme weather event affect access to HIV prevention and treatment services. This increases the chances of HIV transmission with worsening health outcome among those already infected as a result of interruptions in ART access and treatment. Effect of environmental changes on HIV victims. Environmental change related challenges are linked to increase in human migration. These changes, such as rise in extreme weather event, crisis and conflict, overdepletion of natural resources, and food insecurity, are linked to increase in human migration. For example, increased risk of flooding or mudslide in mountain regions, rivers, and coastal plains prone to disaster, induce permanent migration that make return impossible. The link between human migration and the spread of HIV has been well known since the beginning of the AIDS epidemic. Human migration patterns have frequently been used to explain the variation in HIV in the global south, as well as their spread from West Africa to East Africa and South Africa in the 80s and 90s. A study suggests that human migration can account for about 57% of the variation in HIV. Prevalence among women, and 24% of the variation among men across sub-Saharan Africa between 1985 and 1994. Migration indeed drives HIV transmission and poor HIV outcomes through several pathways, such as increased sexual networks and sexual exploitation due to food insecurity, increased drug use, urbanization, reduced accessibility to prevention and treatment services, and reduced adherence to antiretroviral medications. The expansion of sexual networks is a particularly important mechanism. Several studies suggest that migrants, particularly seasonal or temporary migrants, are more likely to have expanded sexual networks and engage in riskier sexual behavior than non-migrants. For example, studies along the borders of South Africa, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe, this is the region with highest HIV rate in the world, have consistently shown higher rate of economic and sexual exploitation among migrants. And this brings to my attention what happened this morning in Mozambique, the flash flood that destroyed about 102 houses and around displaced around 182,000 people with cholera in the making. Now the government is trying to arrange how to immunize the affected victims of the flood with a cholera immunization. And this should also come to the effect, being HIV positive related country, so the displacement will also have to consider HIV prevention in that case. This is a typical case of climate change effect on the HIV/AIDS. Also, sea level rise poses a threat on people living in disaster-prone areas, of course. The rise in the sea levels will likely increase by about half a meter by the year 2095 due to melting glaciers. This will threaten over 500 million people living in disaster-prone coastal areas around the world. In most countries a trend in rural to urban migration will be skyrocketed within the coming decade due to flooding in rural settings. Impact of climate change and human migration will be witnessed in sub-Saharan Africa with about 86 million migrants by 2050 due to decreased crop productivity and water shortages. In South and Southeast Asia, unpredictable rainfall and drought will cause migration of over 8 million people to the Middle East, Europe, and North America, with an additional 40 million internal migrants predicted by 2050. All over, a combination of drought, floods, and rising sea levels are projected to result in the migration of anywhere from around 200 million people to about 1 billion people by the year 2050. The spirit of HIV infection and environmental have things in common. Indeed, the spirit of HIV infection and the impact of environmental change have many things in common. People with the least resources are affected the most, either by the climate change or by the pandemic of the HIV and other infectious diseases. This is largely due to technical incapabilities to contain the associated challenges by the victims. The victims are often not included in mitigating the effect of environmental changes on their health, which call to question community participation and community engagement. Decisions were made on their behalf. So in reality, affected communities were unable to act on mitigation and adaptation declarations and protocols because they lack the capacity to comply with the good intentions of the policy and decision makers. Additionally, just as climate change induces social fracas like poverty, gender vulnerability, exploitation of children, and access to healthcare, so too is HIV in heightening the effect of social dislocations on their victims. Environmental degradation drives the onset of disasters. Indeed, degradation drives the onset of disasters. For example, reduction in water availability, desertification of one's bushy area, long-term effect of recurrent flooding, sinking coastal zones, increased salinization of groundwater, and soil pollution, among others, cause forced displacement of people to regions with better income opportunities and living conditions. Heavy rain and strong winds cause flash flooding, while lack of it cause drought, with hundreds of deaths and widespread damage to homes, communication facilities, hospitals, and health clinics. All this suffered severe damage. Furthermore, fluid water surge cause HIV medications washed away. And this washed away subjects the people living with HIV to be emotionally disturbed, worrying about their health and access to medication. Also, reduction in essential resources due to climate change may trigger migration. These resources like water and food production due to climate change effect may trigger armed conflict and violence. This armed conflict may in turn lead to displacement and associated situations of increased HIV/AIDS transmission. Emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases due to climate change. Of course, changing climate unlock new infectious pathogens. The new infection pathogen that looked will usually adapt to temperatures suitable to them. The temperatures will make it friendly to them. And a study in this regard was published by Johns Hopkins University in January 2020, which raises concern that climate change will cause new heat-tolerant disease that jeopardize human ability to fight infection. So in this regard, a climate change condition of drought is linked to coccidiomycosis epidemics, with consequential effect on immunocompromised individuals, including those with untreated HIV infections. Other HIV-related opportunistic fungal infections include pneumocystis, cryptococcosis, and histoplasmosis, among others. All are strongly connected to climate change indicators, such as increase in temperature as a result of fungal spores moving for a long distance through dust, dirt, and dried part droppings. Climate factors influence the emergence and re-emergence of infectious diseases. The emergence and re-emergence of infectious diseases are really climate related. And for example, the incidence of mosquito-borne diseases, which include malaria, dengue, viral encephalitis, Zika, and among other diseases, they are more sensitive to climate. The climate change can directly impact vector-borne diseases transmission, I mentioned above, by altering the vector settings to increase their reproduction ability and bite intensity by shortening the organism's incubation period. Climate change issues related to increases in sea level volume leads to waterborne infections. Climate change issues related to increase in sea level volume and temperature leads to higher incidence of waterborne infections and toxin-related illnesses, such as cholera and shellfish poisoning, as I give example of a Mozambique situation currently going on. Human susceptibility to climate stress. Human susceptibility to climate stress on agriculture and increased flux of ultraviolet radiation might be further compounded by malnutrition due to drought. Human migration and damage to health infrastructures from the projected increase in climate change could indirectly contribute to disease transmission. So this brings to fore a definition of global health that posits that all transborder elements can be categorized under global health issues. So to curtail the effect of climate change on HIV/AIDS and other infectious diseases, the following recommendations are made. This is so as to aid policy brief development and also aid other stakeholders in planning. So in order to reduce the effect of climate change on HIV/AIDS transmission and outcomes, potential solution should focus on reducing fossil-based emissions through mitigation and adaptation techniques. These are green energy come to effect. So sorry for the interruption, please. When you talk of the reducing fossil fuel emissions, bring in green energy into effect. So also, food insecurity is particularly a strong mediator due to its contributing role in human migration and susceptibility to HIV co-infections. The intervention should be sustainable in environmentally friendly agricultural practice. Doing that, they note a significant health co-benefits. HIV/AIDS and climate change require a fundamental investment in innovative research that can change the climate issues narratives considering its complex nature, political correctness, and social diversity. Climate change justice advocates should collaborate with other stakeholders. In this regard, they should collaborate for isolated actions, which should include collaboration with partners like United Nations, AIDS, donor agencies, ministry, department, and agencies like National AIDS Control Councils, among others, to ensure the distribution of antiretroviral medicines, condoms, food packages for people living with HIV, and safe deliveries for HIV-infected pregnant women during disasters. Early warning system for climate change issues should be synergized with HIV/AIDS warning system. For example, preparation for agricultural and food security issues are sometimes climate dependent. As such, this warning system should include HIV prevention program as well. Also, government should identify and designate high-risk areas. Areas susceptible to climate change that often occurs there should be designated as high-risk areas that are too dangerous for human habitation. This means that people living in those locations should be relocated to safe areas or to safer areas. In conclusion, climate change and human health are indeed inextricably linked. The public, private, and civil society sectors have vital roles that can reduce the effect of environmental change issues on society through the actualization of these dimensions. One, each dimension or every dimension should also prioritize pandemics like HIV/AIDS and malaria. Secondly, climate change adaptation and mitigation effort should be intensified. Achieving these pathways required investment and commitment that can address climate change as one of the causes of HIV transmission. Therefore, fighting climate change is synonymous to addressing infectious disease outbreaks and pandemic confronting humans, animals, as well as the planet. So these are the few agents. So thank you for listening, and will be time for Q&A. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Enjoyed that. Has anybody got any questions? We move on to the Q&A part. If you can just chime in or ask something in the box. Raise your hand, easy peasy.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead.
In terms of sustainable practices, you mentioned going away from, I guess, deleterious agricultural practices. Does that all involve in your assessment returning to more indigenous practices when it comes to land stewardship? That was my question.
Yeah, question might come to effect. Yes, indigenous practices has a role to play in that aspect, because what they used to practice in the days of organic farming, so might be able to provide food security. And the aim of that sustainable agriculture practice is to ensure food security, because food security has so many disadvantages when it comes to the population migration and displacement, and also on the issues of recuperating while having infectious diseases. When we talk of nutrition per se, a general saying was saying you are what to eat. So with a good nutritional food, sustenance will be made, and antibodies will be built, and immune will be set against the set infectious disease. So without the sustainable agriculture, to that might not be achieved. So what I'm trying to report here is about food security should be in a sustainable scale. And if traditional practices can offer that, it should be adopted as well. Thank you so much.
Okay. Naziru Sani has their hand up.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Actually, I want to commend the presenter for giving a wonderful presentation. I have a question, please, that need more clarification on the adaptation part of the solutions to overcome the effect of environmental or climate change on the HIV/AIDS. We talked about the adaptation and the mitigation. Can he shed more light for us on this adaptation and the mitigation as how is it going to be implemented? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the question, Dr. Nasser. You know, the entire focus of climate change issues centered around adaptation or mitigation. The mitigation is what can be done to minimize the effect of the climate change on people, while adaptation is what can one do to adapt to the situation. So hence we are talking about the environmental change. And these environmental changes are mostly known, but they happen gradually. So if a causal factor is understood of why the change is occurring in a particular location, so then based on the causal factor, a choice will be made either mitigation or adaptation. So for this to be in effect, one, there should be intensified education on what to do. And there should be also advocacy by civil society organizations, and intervention by private sectors should always be coming in, and also coordination by the public sector, which is mean government, on which one to pick. You know, we are not having a specific issue here for me to give you an example of a mitigation or adaptation, but we are talking about generic approach. But nevertheless, the traditional approach to climate change control are when the people adapt to certain practices in some local areas. So when they see the pattern of the cloud or the pattern of rainfall of the rainy season, that will be able to give them advice to shift to area that is a bit upper or lower. This is part of what we call adaptation. And when we talk of mitigation, for example, when we talk of the fossil fuel emission, the government may introduce carbon tax, for example. For those that emit so much fuel will be able to use the fossil friendly facilities should be able to pay more taxes. So these are just what I should give in summary as regard to adaptation and mitigation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I have understood. Thank you, sir.
Harrison? Is there a Harrison there with their hands raised? Harrison Liana? Perhaps not. Anybody else with any questions?
I think Harrison has put their question in the chat.
Ah. Okay. Shall I read it out? For sustainability purposes, what exactly do you think should be put in place to help curb the effect and limit climate change on HIV infection? Moreover, something that has been put in place, but still we are not even near any solution, especially the entire African countries.
I have not seen the question.
It's on the chat box.
Okay. What is his name?
Harrison.
Okay, for sustainability purposes, what exactly do you think should be put in place to help curb the effect of climate change on HIV infection? Moreover, it is something that has been in place, but still we are not even near any solution, especially. So the question here is generic. But when we talk about sustainability, we are talking about the continuum scale of practicing or doing certain things. For example, if the effect of the climate change here is due to pollute, so a waterproof container should be provided with those in the areas with HIV prevalence where they may keep their drugs safe. And also, people will be able to be advised to be using a warning system to monitor the weather situation and be able to advise themselves. And also those who are living in areas that are too dangerous to live, they should be able to move to a safer area. And the backbone of it should be education, knowledge sharing through radio jingles, gathering, lectures, symposium, webinars like this. All this will be able to keep people informed on the dangers foretell by the climate change in relation to HIV, and also be able to plan well and see to it that whatever is planned is put to effect. I hope I make sense to you, Alison. Thank you.
Fantastic. Any more questions? Okay. Well, what we like to do at the end of the webinars, and I will hand over a closing comment to Prof very shortly. We like to turn our cameras on and we like to have a little picture. So if people are comfortable, they can turn their cameras on. I'll just screen grab it and then we can put it on our social media. It makes us look okay. So I'll wait a few seconds for people to put their cameras on if they so desire. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, there we go. They're coming in. They're coming in. Oh, don't be afraid. All right. Well, I'll take a picture like this anyway. And I will just briefly mention next month we have Professor Ashok Ratan and Professor Abubakar AHRO discussing monkeypox, which obviously is a massive problem as well. Is it an emerging public health pandemic? That is the question to be explored next month. More information on that in the due coming weeks or so. I will pass over to Professor AHRO for a closing statement. But thank you for coming. That's all from me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Umar, for such a wonderful presentation. I think for our take-home message is the HIV pandemic is like a double sword. It cut on this side and it cut on the other side. But as a scientist, I think the part that I found very important is the call for investment into research, whichever type of research, whether clinical research, basic research, or evidence-based research. We really need it. So I think we are thankful to Dr. Umar for highlighting that. So finally, these webinars, the intention is for us to be meeting monthly. After presentation, we'll be brainstorming. So if anybody is interested in any topic and want to be part of the webinar, please do get in touch and we will schedule something for anybody. Yeah. So thank you for coming. We'll be meeting next month where we'll be discussing monkeypox. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Doctor, for presenting. And hopefully we'll see everyone again very soon. If that's
somebody, okay.
No, carry on, please. Okay. Perhaps that's all. Okay. Well, thanks a lot again, and we shall see you next time. Goodbye.